Hi everybody. Today we are going to be talking about multi-step inequalities. So in addition to solving our inequalities, we are also going to need to graph them, and then we're going to also use interval notation. So interval notation is just another way that we're going to write our answer to our inequality. There's a couple things that we're going to make note of. So here we have a parenthesis. Parentheses we're going to use when we're using an open circle. So making sure that that point on the graph is not included. And then we're going to use what's called a bracket when we're using a closed circle. So that meaning that number is included on our graph. So it's always important to know that when we have infinity and a negative infinity symbols, so they look something like this. So here's our infinity symbol and then our negative infinity symbol. So every time we're going to use one of these two symbols, we want to make sure that we are always using our parentheses. Okay, because that just means that our keeps going on forever and ever. So let's look at number 1, all right? Our directions are to solve and the graph and then write the solution to the inequality in interval notation. So let's start by solving. Let's draw our line down the inequality. And what I'm going to do first is I see parentheses, so I'm going to distribute 4 times x and 4 times 3. So 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 3 is 12, is greater than negative 24. So I want to get x by itself. So I'm first going to subtract 12 from both sides. I'm left with 4x is greater than negative 36. Divide both sides by 4. I'm left with x is greater than negative 9. So I'm going to just write this up here because there's going to be some little notes that we're going to have to write. First things first, I'm going to write this in words. X is greater than negative 9. Since we have the greater than symbol, the first thing to note is that we are going to use an open circle, and then the greater direction is always going to point to the right. So let's look at our graph. So we're going to start with writing negative 9 in the middle, and then let's fill in the other numbers. So negative 8, negative 7, negative 10, negative 11. And we said that this is a greater than symbol, so it's going to be an open circle on negative 9. And greater than goes to the right. So when we're talking about interval notation, it's really important to note that we're always going to look at our graph, the furthest left value, then we're going to look at the furthest right value. So looking at our graph, here is our furthest left. And then over here on our right is our furthest right. So when we're really looking at our furthest left, that value is at negative 9. So I'm going to write negative 9. Since this is an open circle, I'm going to use a parenthesis, comma, and the furthest right is an arrow. So that means that this line keeps going on forever and forever. And since it's an arrow, I'm going to use positive infinity. Positive infinity uses a parenthesis. All right, let's look at number 2. We first need to solve. So I'm going to start by distributing. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Bring down the x, bring down the greater than 4. I'm then going to combine like terms. So I can combine this x with a negative 3x because they both have an x on them. So x minus 3x is negative 2x minus 6 is greater than 4. I am then going to add 6 to both sides. I'm left with negative 2x is greater than 10. Divide by negative 2. I'm left with x is, and we just divided by a negative. So we're going to need to flip our sign, and then 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. So let's put a little note here. When we divide by a negative number, you need to flip the inequality. Okay, so if you could see the flip, we started as greater than, and because we divided by a negative number, we're now at the less than symbol. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to take my answer and I'm going to write it up top so we can write some notes. So x is less than negative 5. X is less than negative 5. And because this is a less than symbol, we are going to also, again, use an open circle. But this time, less than is going to point to the left. So let's look at our graph. I'm going to start by putting on the number line, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, then negative 6, negative 7. So on negative 5, we are going to do an open circle, and less than is to the left. So interval notation, we need to do the furthest left and then the right. So my furthest left here is at this arrow, and when we see an arrow, that's going to represent infinity, but this is the negative side. So we're going to do parenthesis, negative infinity, comma, and my furthest right stops right here at negative 5. So I'm going to do parenthesis, negative 5. Now, this is going to be a parenthesis because it is an open circle. Here we go. All right, let's look at number 3. I see parentheses, so I am going to distribute. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. Bring down my 7x. Bring down my less than or equal to negative 2. I am then going to combine like terms. So I can combine this 7x with a negative 2x. So 7x minus 2x is 5x plus 8 is less than or equal to negative 2. Subtract 8 to both sides. I'm left with 5x is less than or equal to negative 10. Divide by 5. I'm left with x is less than or equal to negative 2. Let's move this up here. So x is less than or equal to negative 2. So this is our less than or equal to. And because it has that or equal to sign, so because it has that little equal to sign, we're going to really make sure, we have to make sure that we are going to use a closed circle. And less than or equal to is going to point to the left. So let's go to our graph and let's graph x. Let's graph x is less than -2. So -2, -1, 0, -3, -4. So we said less than or equal to, so this is going to be a closed circle on -2. And we are going to point to the left because it is less than. So I'm sure you've already noticed now, but our arrow is facing in the negative infinity direction. And when that happens, when we write our interval notation, we're always going to start with parenthesis negative infinity, comma. And then the furthest right stops right at our number 2. So comma positive or comma -2, and because it's a closed circle, we are going to use a bracket. All right, let's look at number 4. All right, I see parentheses, so let's start with distributing. So -8 times x is -8x. -8 times -1 is +8. Bring down the negative x, less than or equal to -28. I'm going to combine like terms, so I can combine this -8x with this -1x. -8 minus 1 is -9x. Bring down this +8 is less than or equal to -28. Subtract 8 to both sides. I am left with -9x is less than or equal to, so -28 minus 8 gives me -36. Divide both sides by -9, and we just divided by a negative. So when we divide by a negative, we need to flip our inequality. So we're going to flip our inequality. So this is going to say x is now greater than or equal to +4. So x is greater than or equal to +4. So this says greater or equal, and because it has that or equal to, this is going to be a closed circle, and greater than always points to the right. So let's go ahead and let's graph this. So we're at 4 on our number lines. Let's put our numbers 4, 5, 6, 3, 2, 1. And we said at 4, this is going to be a closed circle because it has that equal to line underneath the inequality. And greater than always points to the right. So when we're writing interval notation, we need to figure out what is our furthest left. So looking at our graph, the furthest left is right here at the number 4. So we're going to put the number 4, and it's a closed circle, so we're going to put a bracket, comma, and then our furthest right is here, but it's an arrow. And because it's an arrow, we are going to indicate that with positive infinity as it keeps going on forever, and infinity always has a parenthesis. Okay, so I only want you to do a few of these. So I want you to do number 5. I want you to solve and graph and write the interval notation for number 7. And I also want you to solve and graph and write interval notation for number 9. So 5, 7, and 9.